Hello, friends. I'm going to read some poems for you today. The poems are written by my favorite poet, Shel Silverstein. He writes poems for kids. Adults like them too, but they're pretty silly poems. Some of them are a little bit silly, some are very, very silly, and some can teach us something. So I think you'll notice that as you're reading. You might have heard many of these before, especially at school with me. I have heard these poems so many times that I have them memorized, which means I don't really need to read the words for most of them. If you listen to them many, many times, you can memorize them too. And then you can go to somebody and say, hey, do you want to hear a poem by Shel Silverstein? And then you say the poem. It's pretty fun. There's pictures that go along with them, so you can look at the pictures. If you know the poem, go ahead and say it with me. The Sitter. Mrs. McTwitter, the babysitter, I think she's a little bit crazy. She thinks the babysitter's supposed to sit upon the baby. Oh no. It's just silly. No babysitters really think that. That's what makes these poems so silly. Signals. This is like a traffic signal. When the light is green, you go. When the light is red, you stop. But what do you do when the light turns blue with orange and lavender spots? What do you do? This poem is about kids using their imagination. It's called Rock and Roll Band. If we were a rock and roll band, we'd travel all over the land. We'd play and we'd sing and wear spangly things if we were a rock and roll band. If we were a rock and roll band and we were up there on the stand, people would hear us and love us and cheer us. Hooray for that rock and roll band! If we were a rock and roll band, we'd have 1 million fans. We'd giggle and laugh and sign autographs if we were a rock and roll band. If we were a rock and roll band, the people would all kiss our hands. We'd be millionaires and have extra long hair if we were a rock and roll band. But we ain't no rock and roll band. We're just 7 kids in the sand with homemade guitars and pails and jars and drums of potato chip cans. Just 7 kids in the sand, talking and waving our hands and dreaming and thinking, ooh, wouldn't it be grand if we were a rock and roll band? See how they're just pretending and imagining? They're having a lot of fun. We can have a lot of fun imagining we're something else. Super fun. The next poem is a pretty short one. It's also really silly. Wavy. I thought that I had wavy hair until I shaved. Instead, I found that I have straight hair and a very wavy head. Oh, this is a very favorite one of many kids. It's called Backward Bill. Backward Bill, he lives way up on Backward Hill, which is really a hole in the sandy ground, 'cause that's a hill turned upside down. Backward Bill's got a backward shack with a big front porch that's built out back. You walk through the window and look out the door, and the cellar is up on the very top floor. Backward Bill, he rides like the wind, don't know where he's going, but he sees where he's been. His spurs go neigh, and his horse goes clang, and his gun goes knab. It never goes bang. Backward Bill's got a backward pup. They eat their supper when the sun comes up. And he's got a wife named Backward Lil. She's my own true hate, says Backward Bill. Backward Bill wears his hat on his toes and puts on his underwear over his clothes. And come every payday, he pays his boss and rides off smiling and carrying his horse. backward bill, backward bill. Lots of opposites in that book. Everything is backwards. Very silly. Here's another one, very silly. If you notice here, there's a man with a lot of hats, and here there's a man with a lot of heads and only one hat. And I think we can figure out what would make sense for these people to do. Let's see. Mr. Smeds and Mr. Spats. Mr. Spats had 21 hats, and none of them were the same. And Mr. Smeds had 21 heads, and only one hat to his name. Now when Mr. Smeds met Mr. Spats, they talked of the buying and selling of hats. And Mr. Spats bought Mr. Smeds' hat. Did you ever hear anything crazier than that? Did you understand? I thought that this guy was going to buy a bunch of his hats. But instead, he bought the one hat that he has. So he used to have 21 hats. And now he has 22. And he used to have one hat. And now he has 0. Shel Silverstein really was a very silly person. I think that's what we like about him. Here's another very silly one. Anteater. A genuine anteater, the pet man told my dad. Turns out it was an aunt eater. And now my uncle's mad. Get it? Who did the aunt eater eat? Another very silly one. This is a bathtub. It's called Crowded Tub. There's too many kids in this tub. There's too many elbows to scrub. I just washed a behind that I'm sure wasn't mine. There's too many kids in this tub. Yeah, I think we shouldn't be taking a bath with that many people. Hard to get clean that way. Zebra question. I asked the zebra, are you black with white stripes or white with black stripes? And the zebra asked me, are you good with bad habits or are you bad with good habits? Are you noisy with quiet times or are you quiet with noisy times? Are you happy with some sad days or are you sad with some happy days? Are you neat with some sloppy ways or sloppy with some neat ways? And on and on and on and on and on and on he went. I'll never ask a zebra about stripes again. Now this one is pretty silly, but this is one of the ones that can teach us something. So we know this is a toad and this is a kangaroo, and we know that toads can jump really well and that kangaroos can hop really well. And this is a story about when a toad met a kangaroo. Said the toad to the kangaroo, I can hop and so can you. So if we marry, we could have a child who could jump a mountain or hop a mile, and we could call it a toadaroo. Said the hopeful toad to the kangaroo. Said the kangaroo, my dear, what a perfectly lovely idea. I would most gladly marry you, but as for having a toadaroo, I'd rather we call it a kangarood. Said the kangaroo to the frowning toad. So they argued, but couldn't agree on rangatoo, no, kangaree. And finally the toad said, I don't give a dang if it's rude to toad or toad a kang. I really don't feel like marrying you. Fine with me, said the kangaroo. And the toad had no more to say. And the kangaroo just hopped away. And they never married or had a child who could jump a mountain or hop a mile. What a loss and what a shame, just because they couldn't agree on a name. A lot to be learned from that one. And this one's just pure silly. Nothing to be learned, I don't think. It's called The Twistable Man. He's the twistable, turnable, squeezable, pullable, stretchable, foldable man. He can crawl in your pocket or fit in your locket or screw himself into a 20-volt socket or stretch himself up to a steeple or taller or squeeze himself into a thimble or smaller. He can. Course he can. He's the twistable, turnable, squeezable, pullable, stretchable, shrinkable man. And he lives a passable life with a squeezable, lovable, kissable, huggable, pullable, tuggable wife. And they have 2 twistable kids who bend up the way that they did. And they turn and they stretch just as much as they can. For this bendable, foldable, do what you're toldable, easily moldable, buy what you're soldable, washable, mendable, highly dependable, buyable, saleable, always available, bounceable, shakeable, almost unbreakable, twistable, turnable man. And the last poem we're going to read from this book is called Hitting. It's a really good rhyming one. Use a log to hit a hog. Use a twig to hit a pig. Use a rake to hit a snake. Use a swatter to hit an otter. Use a ski to hit a bee. And use a feather when you hit me. Those were poems from A Light in the Attic by Shel Silverstein. I hope you enjoyed them, friends. I loved reading them to you. Listen to them many times, and then you can learn some of these poems and tell them to other people and make them happy.